Vietnam is a war that doesn't get talked about a whole lot in contemporary movies, and I guess in retrospect, you can kind of understand why. Today's generations have got their own legacy of long, draining, and ultimately fruitless conflicts to contend with. But either way, Vietnam has served as a backdrop to some of the greatest war movies ever made, from classics like Apocalypse Now to Platoon, The Deer Hunter, and Full Metal Jacket. All of them are awesome movies in their own right, but the problem is that their success tends to overshadow a lot of smaller, less bombastic films set in the same era, one of which is an absolute gem called Bat 2-1, the story of an Air Force colonel who gets shot down behind enemy lines and the resulting operation to try to rescue him. Made on a small budget and dealing more with the practical realities of the war than the political and social turmoil that came with it, Bat 2-1 never really got the recognition that it deserved. And it's a shame because the movie's fucking awesome, so let's see if we can put that right, shall we? The movie begins in the final year of the Vietnam War, with Lieutenant Colonel I. Seal Hamilton flying a recon mission over North Vietnam. The Americans are about to launch a major bombing offensive to pound the entire area, and Hamilton's there to scout out the enemy defences for them. He's more of a desk jockey than a frontline military man, used to watching the war play out from distant control rooms with a cup of coffee. He's also close to retirement, and not particularly enthusiastic about being there. Anyway, before you know it, their plane gets shot down by surface-to-air missiles, and Hamilton's the only one to make it out alive. Now he's trapped behind enemy lines, with limited resources, and his only point of contact is a rescue plane with the call sign Bird Dog. Because he's too deep into enemy territory to get picked up, he's forced to make his way south to reach the evac point. The problem is that the Viet Cong are hot on his trail. They know that he's a high-ranking intelligence officer with intel about the coming offensive, so they want to capture him real bad. The Americans, on the other hand, are equally determined to keep him from falling into enemy hands, no matter the cost, if you catch my drift. So the movie becomes a race against time to get Hamilton out before the Viet Cong find him or the bombing offensive destroys the entire area. Hamilton has to use his ingenuity and resourcefulness to stay one step ahead of his enemies, and some of the stuff he comes up with is absolute gold. For example, realising that they're intercepting his radio transmissions to plot his location, he comes up with a code based around his favourite sport, golf, and plots an escape route using holes from his local courses. Stuff that the Viet Cong absolutely wouldn't understand. As he slowly makes his way through the war-torn country, he gets to see Vietnam from a perspective he's never experienced before, and the various hardships and horrors gradually take their toll on the man. An armed confrontation with a Vietnamese villager forces him to kill to defend himself, leaving him wounded and traumatised. A botched rescue attempt results in several American airmen getting executed, prompting a napalm strike against the nearby village, despite Hamilton's pleas that there are women and children being used as human shields. It's pretty grim stuff to watch, but given what you've just seen, you absolutely understand the rationale for doing it. And while all this stuff's going on, Bird Dog does his best to guide and encourage his increasingly exhausted and demoralised contact from the air, even going so far as to disobey orders to try to rescue Hamilton by himself, just hours before the bombing raid begins. Bat 2-1 is a surprisingly refreshing take on the Vietnam flick, which I guess had become kind of played out by the late 80s. While most films tend to use the war as some kind of metaphor for man's descent into madness and barbarism, or the dehumanising nature of the military, or the tragedy of a lost generation of young men abandoned by their country, Bat 2-1 is more of a straight-up story of survival, perseverance and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. It certainly doesn't shy away from the horrors of war, or the waste of young lives that comes with it, but it also doesn't make them the sole focus of the film. Hamilton is also not your typical action hero. He's an older man, out of shape and unprepared for the situation he's been thrown into. He's never even fired a weapon in anger before, and initially, he's totally dependent on the rescue team to tell him what to do. But his sharp mind allows him to find solutions that others overlook, and the moment he comes up with his escape plan, his whole demeanour changes and he takes control of the situation again. The relationship between him and Bird Dog becomes the emotional anchor for the movie, as they slowly open up and get to know each other, each man going through his own losses and hardships as the movie progresses. And it's pretty cool that they never even meet each other face to face until like the last 10 minutes. And damn, any movie that puts Gene Hackman and Danny Glover together is alright in my book. Overall, Bat 2-1 is a refreshingly straight up, unpretentious Vietnam film that acknowledges the complexities of the war, but doesn't get so bogged down in them that it overshadows the rest of the story. And that's just as well, because the story here is a damn good one, well written and sensitively realised, brilliantly acted and competently shot, and ultimately, a satisfying watch that deserves a lot more attention than it got. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.